Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we're continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and the Ukraine. Now, today I have started the program with our map looking at the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. Now, this Google map that I'm using now could be old. It may not be old. But from the information that we have, the Russians have yet to destroy the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. So why is that? Why haven't the Russians destroyed the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense? It's a very large building. To my understanding, it's still being used by Ukrainian military personnel. It has not been bombed in any significant manner. Now, on the other hand, if we were to go over to, let's say, Iraq, and I can tell you with certainty, the Republican Palace in Baghdad, the Iraqi Ministry of Defense, the Iraqi Air Force headquarters, all these sites were hit and essentially destroyed by U.S. cruise missiles and JDAMs, guided bombs. Destroyed, gone. The Yugoslavian campaign, in which the United States felt that it needed to bomb Serbia and annex Kosovo and hand it over to the Albanians, a traditional land of Serbia. The Chinese embassy was destroyed in Belgrade during this bombing campaign. Now, a hypothetical. We've looked at Baghdad, we've looked at Belgrade, we looked at Serbia. Hypothetical. Mexico. Let's pretend 5-10 years from the present date that China has decided to create a military alliance. And let's just say that in this military alliance, we see the traditional powers, maybe Russia, North Korea, Iran, some other nation states, join this Chinese military alliance. This military alliance designed to contain the United States. A purpose-driven alliance designed to contain the United States. Now let's pretend for a minute that Mexico, the Mexicans down in Mexico, decide to join this Chinese alliance designed to contain the United States. Let's pretend for a minute that Chinese troops in training missions start to form in various parts of Mexico. What would the United States do? You think the United States would ask Mexico nicely, hey, please don't join this alliance. It makes us uncomfortable. But you know, at the end of the day, Mexico, it's your choice. You have the right to do what you want to do. So please, feel free, join this alliance designed to contain our expansion. You think that would happen? Or would it look a little bit different? Would it look more like what happened in Iraq? Would it look more like what happened in Libya? Would it look more like what happened in Serbia? Fair question, right? I think it's a fair question. So again, back to that Tucker Carlson interview with Vladimir Putin regarding Moscow's concern about NATO expansion into Ukraine, designed, purpose-driven, to prevent Russian, quote-unquote, expansion. After the fall of the Soviet Union, Russian influence decreased. It retracted. It retracted from all the way from East Germany all the way back to Belarus. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Hungary, Czech, Slovak Republic, Romania. All these nation states joined the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And again, if you recall in the interview, Tucker Carlson inquired about the possible prospects of Russia joining NATO. And the United States said no. Now let's be realistic why the United States and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization said no. If there is no Russian threat or a perceived Russian threat, there is no North Atlantic Treaty Organization. You have to have an enemy for a military alliance such as NATO. It has to exist. You cannot have a military alliance without a perceived enemy. So here we are. But again, compare and contrast what's happening now with Ukraine and think about what the United States would do if Mexico was to join some sort of military alliance specifically designed to go against the United States. And what the United States would do. I would wager that at the end of the day, things would look quite a bit like what we are seeing now between Russia and Ukraine. Without a doubt. And I would say Mexico is probably the best example that I could give in terms of some hypothetical military alliance designed to join the Chinese and prevent American expansionism. I mean, if you're going to create a military alliance to prevent U.S. expansion, Mexico seems a logical choice. Ukraine was the coup de grace of NATO expansion. It started with the unification of Germany, which the Russians were fine with. The Russians just said, hold on a second, don't go further east. What did NATO do? They went further east. Poland, all the aforementioned countries that I have mentioned. And now it continues. Finland, Sweden. And depending on how this war goes, what remains of Ukraine after this conflict could very well end up in some sort of NATO alliance or NATO accommodation. Now, what's happening on the ground in terms of the continued fighting? Well, Avdiivka is on the verge of falling. Let's go over to the deep state map. That darn donut. Now you can see that it is now in game for Avdiivka. The Russians, as I've talked about before, have broken through the main defensive lines both in the north, in the south, and are now conducting clearing operations in the actual city itself. Now there's 3 sectors that are going to be very important in this ongoing battle. There is the industrial plant to the northwest. There is the old Soviet apartment blocks kind of towards the southwest of the city. And then there is the single-family home sector. These are individual single-family units, homes, not apartment blocks, that are located in this area here. Let's go back to the Rondelli Foundation map. It gives you a better, clearer picture. Not as accurate in terms of what the front lines look like. And I'd have to say neither is this completely. But again, the industrial plant, the coke plant, the fortified redoubt, this is where the main Ukrainian defenses are. This is going to be the toughest nut to crack here. And then finally, the city itself, where people live. Not the city itself, but the single-family homes of the people who once lived in this city. And this is what is being cleared right now by the Russians. Now, eventually, we're going to get to a point where, in all probability, the industrial facility to the northwest is going to be completely encircled. And, more importantly, the old Soviet blocks to the southwest are going to be completely enveloped as well. Now, the question is what will the Russians do? How will the Russians try and crack this nut? Is it going to be a first Chechen War type of operation, the likes of which we observed in Grozny, where the Russians just pummeled the daylights out of Grozny, essentially destroyed it, and then moved in? Or is this going to be a much more methodical operation, simply designed to starve out the defenders in this area? Or will the Ukrainians attempt a breakthrough to the west, attempt to maneuver out of this cauldron and reestablish defensive lines further to the west? Seems a little late for that type of operation. And I think the Ukrainians are really in a no-win situation now in Avdiivka. We think it's going to probably look a lot like Bakhmut at the end of the day, but we'll have to see what happens. The Russians continue attacking all along the line of contact. Not a major maneuver campaign per se. We are seeing a higher tempo in terms of maneuver elements. We are seeing renewed Russian battalion tactical groups moving forward, attacking positions of the Ukrainians. And we continue to see vast amounts of artillery being used by the Russians. But again, the whole front line is very, very active right now. There have been multiple breakthroughs by the Russians along the front line, and the Ukrainian situation is precarious, especially in terms of ammunition and the ability to bring in new units and reconstitute existing units that have been destroyed throughout the campaign. Again, the Ukrainians are having trouble recruiting and keeping personnel in its army. This is not like the beginning of the war, where the Ukrainians were seeing a plethora of volunteers wanting to join the Ukrainian cause, wanting to join the Ukrainian military. We're not seeing that now. The casualty rate has become so high and conditions on the front line so dire that individuals in Ukraine proper simply do not want to join the military now. It's that bad. And they're being forced, they're being compelled to sign up, conscripted, and forced, pressed into military service. And that's going to continue to degrade the morale and the fighting capability of the Ukrainian military, eventually leading to, in all probability, a Russian victory. So that's where we set for today. We will continue to monitor. We will continue to report. Thank you for joining us. More to come. As always, have a good day.